So I wanted to give you a brief overview of Chapter 4 and Chapter 5, and I did something a little different this week. Instead of jumping right into the videos, I posted the problems that I'll be doing on the videos with the solutions. And I want you to look over those before you watch the videos. In fact, I'm not even going to upload the videos yet because I want you to read those problems. I think it will help if you read through the problems before you watch the video so that you know what I'm doing when I get started and you can maybe have questions about the problems that I'll answer during the videos. In Chapter 4, we get into what's called job order costing, and the big part of this chapter is overhead. So in every job we have, so we have job ABC, for example, we have direct materials, we have direct labor, and we have manufacturing overhead. And manufacturing overhead is any product cost that is not direct. So if you cannot directly trace the materials or directly trace the labor, then it goes into manufacturing overhead, as does any other product costing. For example, utilities on the factory, or rent on the factory, or insurance on the factory. Anything related to the manufacturing process that's not direct materials or direct labor is manufacturing overhead. Because we don't know exactly what manufacturing overhead is as we go through the process, we use a process to allocate this. And so when you think about allocation, think about when you go to a restaurant with a group of people and there's 5 of you and the ticket is $50. So if you were going to allocate that, it would be $10 each, right? Some of you might order less and some of you might order more, but that's all we mean by allocating. And the way we allocate is we take our estimated overhead for the year, and I'm going to use year. You can use period, but I'm going to use year. And we divide that by the estimated, we call it driver or activity. What is driving it up? So for example, if I think in my business, my estimated overhead for the year is going to be $200,000. And what drives up my overhead is my direct labor hours. So I can make a correlation between the more hours we work, the more overhead we have. And so I say that my estimated driver is my direct labor hours. And I estimate this year we're going to work 20,000 direct labor hours. So what that means is I'm going to divide this, and for every direct labor hour I work, I'm going to apply $10 of manufacturing overhead. So it's $10 of manufacturing overhead applied to a product for every direct labor hour worked. Okay, so if I go back over here to this example that I gave you in this job order cost, and I'm working on a job, and I've got direct materials of $200, and I've got direct labor of, let's say, 5 hours at $20 an hour. That's what I'm paying for direct labor, not overhead. Don't get the two confused. And then I've got manufacturing overhead, and I see over here, okay, I'm applying $10 of overhead for every direct labor hour I work. So if I work 5 hours, I'm going to apply $10 of overhead per hour. So the cost of this job now has become $200 for direct materials, $100 for direct labor, and $50 for manufacturing overhead. And then I sum those up, and here's the cost of my job. So when we say job order costing, this is what we're referring to. Okay, so this is using one, and we call this $10, we call this a predetermined overhead rate. And it's really interesting. In one of the MBA classes I was teaching in this topic one time, we had a gentleman in the class who worked in a manufacturing center, and he was so amazed at this process because he had been doing something like this in job costing, but he really didn't know what he was doing. And so now he had a better understanding. In Chapter 5, we get into activity-based costing. It's the same principle. We're still talking about the cost of a job or the cost of a product, except now instead of having one predetermined overhead rate, we're going to have several overhead rates. So if I was looking at the same company and I had $200,000 of overhead, same company, estimated overhead. Instead of having one driver, which is my direct labor hours, we said that was 20,000. This is one activity, or one driver, as we might sometimes say. Instead of doing that, what we're going to do is go, you know what, we want a better allocation. So we're going to take that $20,000 of estimated overhead and break it down into activities. So we might have design, and we might have packaging. Actually, let's do that next. We might have design, we might have assembly, we might have quality review, and then we might have packaging. So we've taken that same overhead and broken it down into these activities. So this one might be 50,000, 40,000, 30,000, and I'm trying to equal 200,000, so 80,000. Packaging's really expensive. Let's change those just to make this make a little bit more sense. I'm completely making these numbers up, which is dangerous. So this equals 200, just like this. It's the same overhead, except instead of having one rate, we're going to have 4. And so then we've got to have 4 drivers. And so we might come over here and we're going to go, okay, this is the overhead, this is the activity, and this is the driver. So for design, it might be direct labor hours, just like we did before. For assembly, it might be machine hours. For quality review, it might be number of items reviewed. And for packaging, it might be direct labor cost. It can be whatever makes the most sense in your company. There's never a defined, it's going to be whatever makes most sense for your company. So if our direct labor hours, again, are 20,000, just like we had up here, let's say our machine hours are 40,000. Our items reviewed, because in quality review, you don't review everything. You just review a random amount. Let's say it's, I don't know, 500. And then direct labor cost, if we're going off this same model, we've got 20,000 of direct labor hours and we're paying about $20 an hour. That's going to be $400,000. Then we do the same thing. We divide our overhead by our driver. In every one of these, that's what we do. So I'm going to go ahead and carry that down. So this one is going to be $250 of overhead in this activity design per direct labor hour. This one will be $2 per machine hour. This one would be $60 per item reviewed. I'm hoping you're seeing the pattern here. And then this one, actually, it's better to look at it as a percentage. This is going to be 10% of direct labor cost. And that's what we do in Chapter 5. Same idea, we're still applying overhead, but in Chapter 5 we're getting a better allocation because we're doing it by activity rather than one overhead rate. So review review the video lecture problems after you watch this, and then I'll be posting those solutions and talking through those later today.